Hello, I don't know who's here, so I'm going to wait for a few minutes. We're going to read, I think it's 4 chapters tonight, 12, 13, 14, and 15, I guess. 15? 15, yes. Yeah. So we're going to read 12 through 15 tonight. So, hey Reed, hey Caroline, how are y'all? Caroline, I'm so excited about Wednesday's Egyptian dress up and Egypt projects. It's going to be a great day. I'm excited. Tomorrow's a big day for the seniors. I've been cleaning house and doing all kinds of stuff. So, yeah, it's a busy day. So I'm looking forward to next Wednesday where I can see your projects and see the dress up, and I get to do the fun, crazy Egyptian makeup. So, 7:02 right now. It says I have 2 viewers. I obviously can't tell who they are. So it says I don't know who the viewers are, but it says there's 2 viewers. So we'll get started in just a minute. Now I have 4 viewers. Yay. So I know that, oh, hey, Sammy. I'm guessing Christina's going to be right behind you. Also, my nephew Abram has been following along. Abram, I'm glad you're visiting us and joining our reading time together. And possibly Hudson, I'm not sure. So thanks for joining. And we're looking forward to getting started. My sister actually just texted me. So I may need to share her the link real quick. Let me, I don't even know how to share this. Maybe I can share it right here. I don't even know if I'm still here. I'm going to try to share this to link so that people can see it real quick. Let's see. So we're going to do chapters 12 through 15. 12 through 15. So right now. Why was Christina sitting with you? I don't know. Was she sitting with you? I meant that she was right behind you, meaning she's probably going to say hello right after you said hello. So I didn't mean like sitting with you. I just meant she was probably close to you. Okay, so I'm going to start as soon as they're logged on. So I got some rain today. I also worked on some centerpieces for some tables that I'm going to do. My hair's crazy. Sorry. I had to put my hair up to stay out of the way. Did laundry today. You know, all that mom stuff. And Mr. Baker is picking up pizza for us for dinner tonight. So I'm really excited about that. Oh, we have 6 viewers. Yay. This is awesome. I'm excited for everyone who's here tonight. This is one of the highlights of my days. So I'm going to get started just a second as soon as I know that everyone's here. Sorry, we're starting late. I just don't want anybody to get behind and get started without being here with us. Okay. So let me show you the picture again of chapter 12. Well, let me read the last little piece of chapter 11, and then we'll pick up with chapter 12. So remember, he's been in the dump for 180 days. And he got to the dump because Lawrence and Nellie's daughter, Lolly, was very rude, mean, disrespectful to him, and threw him in the trash. And he was delivered to the dump. And he's been there for approximately 6 months. 180 days is about 6 months. And he doesn't like it at all. He says it's worse than the bottom of the ocean. Okay, I'm glad Abram's here. Yay, we're going to get started. So we're just reviewing that he's been at the dump for 6 months, and he says it's worse than the bottom of the ocean. So the garbage shifted again, and suddenly, miraculously, the beautiful, buttery light of late afternoon shone on Edward's face. And here we have why his face is being exposed to the sun and the light. Edward did not have much time to savor the light, for the dog suddenly appeared above him, dark and shaggy, blocking his view. Edward was pulled out of the garbage by his ears, dropped, and then picked up again, this time around the middle and shaken back and forth with a great deal of ferocity. The little dog growled deep in its throat and then dropped Edward again and looked him in the eye. Edward stared back. "Hey, get out of here, you dog!" It was Ernest, the king of garbages, and therefore the king of the world. The dog grabbed Edward by his pink dress and took off running. "That's mine! That's mine! All garbages is mine!" Ernest shouted. "You come back here!" But the little dog did not stop. The sun was shining, and Edward felt exhilarated. Who, having known him before, would have thought that he could be so happy now? Crusted over with garbage, wearing a dress, held in the slobbery mouth of a dog, and being chased by a madman? But he was happy. The dog ran and ran until they reached a railroad track. They crossed over the tracks, and there, underneath a scraggly tree, in a circle of bushes, Edward was dropped in front of a large pair of feet. The dog began to bark. Edward looked up and saw that the feet were attached to an enormous man with a long, dark beard. "What's this, Lucy?" asked the man. He bent and picked up Edward. He held him firmly around the middle. "Lucy," said the man, "I know how much you enjoy rabbit pie." Lucy barked. Yes, I know. Rabbit pie is a true delight, one of the pleasures of our existence." Lucy let out a hopeful yip. "And what we have here? What you have so graciously delivered to me is definitely a rabbit. But the best chef in all the world would be hard-pressed to make him into a pie." Lucy growled. "This rabbit is made of china, girl." The man held Edward closer to him. They looked each other in the eye. "You're made of china, aren't you, Malone?" He gave Edward a playful shake. "You are some child's toy, am I right? And you've been separated somehow from the child who loves you." Edward felt again the sharp pain in his chest. He thought of Abilene, and he saw the path leading up to the house on Egypt Street, and he saw the dusk descending and Abilene running toward him. Yes, Abilene loved him. "So, Malone," said the man. He cleared his throat. "You are lost." That is my guess. Lucy and I are lost, too. At the sound of her name, Lucy let out another yip. Perhaps, said the man, you would like to be lost with us. I have found it much more agreeable to be lost in the company of others. My name is Bull. Lucy, as you may have surmised, is my dog. Would you care to join us? Bull waited for a moment, staring at Edward, and then with his hands still firmly around Edward's waist, the man reached one enormous finger up and touched Edward's head from behind. He pushed it so it looked as if Edward were nodding his head in agreement. Look, Lucy, he is saying yes, said Bull. Malone has agreed to travel with us. Isn't that swell? Lucy danced around Bull's feet, wagging her tail and barking. And so it was that Edward took to the road with a hobo and his dog. So now we have a new name for Edward. His name is Malone. And Malone is now homeless with a hobo and his dog named Lucy. Chapter 13. What will it take to change Mr. Edward? They traveled on foot. They traveled in empty rail cars. They were always on the move. But in truth, said Bull, we are going nowhere. That, my friend, is the irony of our constant movement. Always moving, but never getting anywhere. Edward rode in Bull's bedroll, slung over Bull's shoulder, with only his head and ears sticking out. Bull was always careful to position the rabbit so that he was not looking down or up, but he was instead forever looking behind him at the road that they had just traveled. At night, they slept on the ground under the stars. Lucy, after her initial disappointment about Edward being unfit for consumption, took a liking to him and slept curled up beside him. Sometimes she even rested her muzzle on his china stomach. And then the noises she made in her sleep, whimpering and growling and chuffing, resonated inside Edward's body. To his surprise, he began to feel a deep tenderness for the dog. During the night while Bull and Lucy slept, Edward, with his ever-open eyes, stared up at the constellations. He said their names, and then he said the names of the people who loved him. He started with Abilene and then went to Nellie and Lawrence, and from there to Bull and Lucy, and then he ended again with Abilene. Abilene, Nellie, Lawrence, Bull, Lucy, Abilene. See, Edward told Pellegrina, I am not like the princess. I know about love. There were times, too, when Bull and Lucy gathered around a campfire with other tramps. But Bull was a good storyteller and an even better singer. Sing for us, Bull, the men shouted. There's a glorious campfire. And Malone is still sitting in the dress on Bull's knee. Bull sat with Lucy leaning against his leg, and Edward balanced on his right knee, and he sang from somewhere deep inside of himself. Just as Edward could feel Lucy's whimpers and growls resonate through his body at night, he could also feel the deep, sad sound of Bull's songs move through him. Edward loved it when Bull sang. And he was grateful to Bull, too, for sensing that a dress was not the right kind of clothing for Edward. Malone, said Bull one night, it's not my desire to offend you or to comment negatively on your choice of garb. But I am forced to tell you that you stick out like a sore thumb in that princess dress. And also, again, with no wish to offend you, the dress has seen better days. Nellie's beautiful dress had not fared well at the dump, or in its subsequent ramblings with Bull and Lucy. It was so torn and dirty and full of holes that it barely even resembled a dress anymore. "I have a solution," said Bull, "and I hope it meets with your approval." He took his own knit stocking cap and cut a big hole in the top of it and 2 small holes on the side of it. And then he took off Edward's dress. "Look, Lucy," he said to the dog, "let's not embarrass Malone by staring at his nakedness." Bull slid the hat over Edward's head, and he pulled it down and poked his arms through the smaller holes. "There you go," he said to Edward. "Now you just need some pants." The pants Bull made himself, cutting up several red handkerchiefs and sewing them together so that they formed a makeshift covering for Edward's long legs. "Now you have the proper outlaw look," said Bull, standing back to admire his work. "Now you look like a rabbit on the run." Bull gave his very own hat for a rabbit. That's a toy. I don't know how Edward couldn't be learning so much. Chapter 14. See the hat cut up, and then there's handkerchiefs cut and tied together. At first, the others thought that Edward was a good joke. "Rabbit," the hobo said, laughing. "Let's chop him up and put him in the stew pot." Or when Bull sat with Edward carefully balanced on his knee, one of them would call out, "Got yourself a little dolly, huh, Bull?" Edward, of course, felt a surge of anger at being referred to as a dolly. But Bull never got angry. He simply sat with Edward on his knee and said nothing. And soon the men became accustomed to Edward. And word of his existence spread. So it was that when Bull and Lucy stepped up to a campfire in another town, another state, another place entirely, the men knew Edward and were glad to see him. "Malone!" they shouted in unison. And Edward felt a warm rush of pleasure at being recognized, at being known. Whatever it was that had begun in Nellie's kitchen, Edward's new and strange ability to sit very still and concentrate the whole of his being on the stories of another became invaluable around the hobo campfire. "Look at Malone," said a man named Jack one evening. "He's listening to every dang word." "Certainly," said Bull. "Of course he is." And later that night, Jack came and sat next to Bull and asked if he could borrow the rabbit. Bull handed Edward over, and Jack sat with Edward upon his knee, and he whispered in Edward's ear. "Helen," said Jack, "and Jack Jr. and Taffy, she's the baby. Those are my kids' names. They are all in North Carolina. You ever been to North Carolina? It's a pretty state. That's where they are. Helen, Jack Jr., and Taffy. You remember their names, okay, Malone?" After this, whenever Bull and Lucy and Edward went, some tramp would take Edward aside and whisper the names of his children in Edward's ear. Betty, Ted, Nancy, William, Jimmy, Eileen, Skipper, and Faith. Edward knew what it was like to say over and over and over and over again the names of those you had left behind. He knew what it was like to miss someone. And so he listened. And in his listening, his heart opened wide, and then wider still. The rabbit stayed lost with Lucy and Bull for a long time. Almost 7 years passed, and in that time, Edward became an excellent tramp. happy to be on the road, restless when he was still. The sound of the wheels on the train tracks became a music that soothed him. He could have ridden the rails forever, but one night, in a railroad yard in Memphis, as Bull and Lucy slept in an empty freight car and Edward kept watch, trouble arrived. A man entered the freight car and shone a flashlight in Bull's face and then kicked him awake. "You bum," he said. "You dirty bum. I'm sick of you guys sleeping everywhere. This ain't no motel." Bull sat up slowly and Lucy started to bark. "Shut up," said the man, and he delivered a swift kick to Lucy's side that made her yelp in surprise. All his life, Edward had known what he was. A rabbit made of china. A rabbit with bendable arms and legs and ears. He was bendable, though, only if he was in the hands of another. He could not move himself, and he had never regretted this more deeply than he did that night when he and Bull and Lucy were discovered in the empty rail car. Edward wanted to be able to defend Lucy, but he could do nothing. He could only lie there and wait. "Say something," said the man to Bull. Bull put his hands up in the air and he said, "We are lost." "Lost, huh? You bet you're lost." And then the man said, "What's this?" And he shone the light on Edward. "That's Malone," said Bull. "What the heck?" said the man. And he poked at Edward with the toe of his boot. "Things are out of control. Things are out of hand. Not on my watch. No, sir. Not when I'm in charge." The train suddenly lurched into motion. "No, sir," said the man again, and he looked down at Edward. "No free rides for rabbits." And he turned, and he flung open the door of the rail car, and then he turned back, and with one swift kick, he sent Edward sailing out into the darkness. The rabbit flew through the late spring air. From far behind, he heard Lucy's anguished howl. "Aroo! Aroo!" she cried. Edward landed with a most alarming thump, and then he tumbled and tumbled and tumbled and tumbled down a long, dirty hill. And when he finally stopped moving, he was on his back, staring up at the night sky. The world was silent. He could not hear Lucy. He could not hear the train. Edward looked up at the stars. He started to say the names of the constellations, but then he stopped. "Bull," his heart said. "Lucy." How many times Edward wondered, would he have to leave without getting the chance to say goodbye? A lone cricket started up a song. Edward listened, and something deep inside of him ached. He wished that he could cry. That's all of 14. Which brings me to chapter 15. A bird on a pole. And now Edward is alone again. But he aches this time. In the morning, the sun rose and the cricket song gave way to bird song, and an old woman came walking down the dirt road and tripped right over Edward. She said, and she pushed at Edward with her fishing pole. "Looks like a rabbit," she said. She put down her basket and bent and stared at Edward. "Oh, he ain't real." She stood back up. She said again. She rubbed her back. "What I say is, there's a use for everything, and everything has its use. That's what I say." Edward didn't care what she said. The terrible ache he had felt the night before had gone away and had been replaced with a different feeling, one of hollowness and emptiness and despair. Pick me up or don't pick me up, the rabbit thought. It makes no difference to me. The old lady picked him up. She bent him double and put him in her basket, which smelled of weeds and fish, and then she kept walking, swinging the basket and singing, "Nobody knows the troubles I've seen." Edward, in spite of himself, listened. "I've seen troubles too," he thought. "You bet I have. And apparently, they aren't over yet." Edward was right. His troubles were not over. The old woman found a use for him. She hung him from a pole in her vegetable garden. She nailed his ears to the wooden pole and spread his arms out as if he were flying and attached his paws to the pole by wrapping pieces of wire around them. In addition to Edward, pie tins hung from the pole. They clinked and they clanked and they shone in the morning sun. "Ain't a doubt in my mind that you can scare them off," the old lady said. Scare who off? Edward wondered. Birds, he soon discovered. Crows. They came flying at him, cawing, screeching, and wheeling over his head and diving at his ears. "Go on, Clyde," said the woman, and she clapped her hands. "You gotta act ferocious." Clyde? Edward felt a weariness so intense wash over him that he thought he might actually be able to sigh aloud. Would the world never tire of calling him by the wrong name? The old woman clapped her hands again. "Get to work, Clyde," she said. "Scare them birds off." And then she walked away from him, out of the garden and toward her small house. The birds were insistent. They flew around his head. They tugged at the loose threads in his sweater. One large crow in particular would not leave the rabbit alone. He perched on the pole and screamed a dark message in Edward's left ear. Caw, 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 without ceasing. As the sun rose higher and shone meaner and brighter, Edward became somewhat dazed. He mistook the large crow for Pellegrina. Go ahead, he thought. Turn me into a warthog if you want. I don't care. I'm done with caring. Caw, caw, the Pellegrina crow crowed. Finally, the sun set and the birds flew away. Edward hung by his ears and looked up at the night sky. He saw the stars, but for the first time in his life, he looked at them and felt no comfort. Instead, he felt mocked. So now his name's Clyde, and he's a scarecrow. You are down there all alone, the stars seem to say to him. And we are up here in our constellations together. I have been loved, Edward told the stars. So, said the stars, what difference does that make when you're all alone now? Edward could think of no answer to that question. Eventually, the sky lightened and the stars disappeared one by one. The birds returned and the old woman came back to the garden. And this time, she brought a boy with her. And that's all of chapter 15. So we will read 16 through, I'm not sure how far yet, next week. So I will see you on Tuesday. And we will see just what this little boy will do for Edward. So he's gone from apathetic and caring about no one but himself to now he feels alone and empty and hollow. And he doesn't care again, but it's a different kind because he's been loved and he's lost love, and it's hard. So y'all have a glorious weekend. I love you all. Hey, David, I'm glad you joined us. So have a good weekend. I love you. I'll see you again on Tuesday night, 7 o'clock, and we'll read a few more chapters about Edward, not Susanna, and not Malone, not Clyde. We will read about Edward. Love you guys. Have a great evening. Thanks for joining. Talk to you soon. Bye.